Everywhere I turn, someone, a doctor, a fellow chronic illness warrior, some type of specialist or health coach is talking about gut health. Why is gut health important for people with chronic illness? What does taking a probiotic supplement do for us? What about a prebiotic supplement? How do we know which ones we should take? My guest this week works for a company that makes these supplements and is here to answer these questions on Chronically Living. I'm Kelsey Harris, a chronic illness warrior and a psychotherapist in training. On Chronically Living and How to Make the Most of It, we're providing tangible ways to improve the well-being of Spoonies. So get ready to make the most out of your life, even with that pesky chronic illness.
My name is Beau Berman, and I'm the marketing director for Layer Origin Nutrition. We're located in Ithaca, New York, which is a couple minutes from the campus of Cornell University in central New York, sometimes referred to as upstate New York. And I'm the marketing director for the company, and we are a nutrition company originally founded by a team of scientists who met while they were finishing up a postdoctoral fellowship and a PhD at Cornell, who specialize in gut health supplements primarily, but other health supplements as well. And our flagship ingredient is called HMO, which stands for human milk oligosaccharide. So Layer Origin Nutrition, the formation of the company began quite a while ago in 2017, whenever two food scientists met at Cornell University, and their names are Jason and Joel. And they, both had a passion for trying to understand, science better and the science of food and the science of nutrition, and also to help people. They also both were interested in, business as well, if we're being frank. And so they had the idea of let's try to form a company that, produces things that are truly scientifically based and can help people. And that's, of course, the origin story of a lot of nutrition companies you hear about. So that doesn't sound too unique. But in any case, they started collaborating and started putting the wheels in motion and started filing for patents, and conducted a lot of research themselves and basically formed a little team of researchers in the lab. And they have a lot of expertise. Both of them have PhDs. One of them was a food science professor at the University of Nebraska, and also worked in the private sector at a company that was basically producing the egg whites that are powdered that they put into a lot of protein bars and things of that nature. So a ton of experience and a ton of, knowledge there between the two of them and their team. And that was 2017, basically 3 years later of research and development, patents, trademarks. There's creating the LLC, a lot that goes into starting a business that is pretty crazy. So I joined the team a bit later. They were looking for somebody who could be sort of their expert in marketing and PR and communications. My background's a little bit different. I was a television news reporter for 11 years on CBS, Fox, and ABC television stations across the country, and then segued into marketing and public relations. And, I was able to meet these guys and join the team as a co-founder and marketing director. So the company has grown a lot in the last year. We didn't start selling products until very late 2019. So it was 2 years of really development. And I joined the team in 2020, so not incredibly long ago. But we've grown a lot since then. We sell everything on Amazon and on our website, layerorigin.com. And so, what makes the company different, what makes it notable is, again, the flagship ingredient.
Despite Beau not being one of the scientists himself, he's had to learn a lot about gut health, pre- and probiotics, and all of the science that goes with it in order to do his job, which is why he's here today to talk to us about gut health, starting with, why is it even important?
Gut health is very important, and I should preface this statement by saying that I am not one of the scientists at our company, so sometimes I'm not the best person to answer that question. However, I do have a communications background, so I've found myself in the role as the person who does interviews for the company and certainly been briefed by our scientists. That said, yes, gut health is very important. And, part of the reason why it's so important is that we've come to know that a lot of the immune system is controlled by or is located in the gut, in the intestines, in that microbiome. And of course, there's multiple microbiomes, something I actually didn't know until a few years ago, but there's essentially a microbiome in the gums. There's different microbiomes, but the main one, when you hear people say microbiome, of course, that they're referring to is mostly in your stomach, in your gut. The gut And so immune health is there, and immune health is something that's obviously incredibly important. Beyond that, you're talking about this is the center of where the majority of the bacteria is located in the body, and basically where it's interacting and interfacing with the rest of your systems. I think that increasingly in the last 10 to 15 to 20 years, scientifically, nutritionally, we've come to realize that the gut bacteria in some sense can actually, in a way, control your behavior in some sense. If you're feeling irritable and having a craving for sugar, that is often the bacteria in your gut that's craving that sugar. And so it's hard to distinguish, what is you versus what is the bacteria. Are they all the same? I mean, it's your body, so it's kind of one and the same. But it can sort of be independent of your mind or, what you actually want to do. You may say, I'm cutting out sugar for a week, yet you suddenly have this intense craving that feels like it's almost coming from outside of you or deep inside of you and almost out of your control. It's so poignant or so strong. And so, yeah, there's a wealth of research, that I won't get into specific studies, but we've come to realize in recent years how important the gut is for so many things, including immunity, weight loss, and even mental health, as we look at the connection between the gut and the brain and how they are connected through the vagus nerve and, things of that nature. So it's incredibly important.
The vagus nerve! We just learned about that last week where my guest mentioned how it does in fact interact with our gut. We know that from an autoimmune perspective, the gut is almost always tied into our illness in some way. So having a basic understanding of how this all works is important for me, and I'm guessing it's probably also important for you to know. So one thing I've always wondered is what's the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic?
So a prebiotic is, it's typically a fiber, and it's basically going to be feeding probiotic bacteria. And so in one of the videos that we produced for our products, we talked about, it takes, sunlight to, grow grass and of course water and some other things as well. And so you have this probiotic bacteria. Some of it is natural to the body. Some of it you might be getting through external sources, such as a food that delivers probiotic bacteria to the system. But to really nurture that probiotic bacteria, it essentially, for lack of a better word, likes to eat something. And so the prebiotic fiber, the prebiotic bacteria is going into your system and feeding and nurturing the probiotic bacteria. That's the simplest explanation, the simplest terms. Probiotics are living strains of bacteria. We talk about you walk into the grocery store and you see a bottle of probiotics and it says X amount of CFUs, colony forming units, on that bottle, or yogurt, it says like this yogurt is live culture, it's active and live culture. And so probiotics are typically referring to the live strains of active and good bacteria that exist within your digestive system, within your body. Prebiotics, and there's a number of different prebiotics. We think ours is the best, which of course we'll get into, but there's a number and they're actually all good. So none of them are per se bad. But prebiotics are specialized plant fibers or types of fiber, it doesn't always have to be plants, that act as food for the good bacteria. So that's kind of the simplest explanation. We could probably talk for hours about this, but that's the explanation in a nutshell.
Okay, so that's a good explanation of how our gut actually works. But how does taking either a prebiotic or a probiotic impact our gut in a positive way?
So you are manipulating your gut health when you, externally supplement or when you add, something new to the mix, so to speak. So if you are taking probiotics, you actually have to be careful because if you take the wrong kind, and it's tough to know what the right or wrong kind is, honestly, which is why we're actually not very, to borrow a financial term, bullish on probiotics, meaning we're not very pro probiotics necessarily supplementation, because you have to be very careful with dosage and strain type, and it can be a little confusing to the average person to know which type to take. If you walk into a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's or a Wegmans or Lion or Publix grocery store or whatever health store, there's umpteen options of probiotics. And how do you know if you need 100 billion CFU or 20 billion CFU or 30 or 50? Which strains do you need? So it can be very complex and confusing. And so what are the risks? I mean, we're not talking about something life-threatening, but more to the extent of a lot of times people take probiotics when they're having negative GI symptoms or symptoms similar to IBS, what would be characterized as IBS, gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, stomach pain, cramping, etc., poor skin. I mean, it could be a number of things, but if you take the wrong probiotics or you just kind of guess, pick and choose, you could actually exacerbate those symptoms and potentially make them worse instead of making them better. So that's kind of where we tell people to exercise caution.
Whoa. I personally do not like the sound of risking it and potentially making my gut health worse. But, let's go back to Beau for more on this.
Coincidentally, as the growth of HMO, which is a type of prebiotic, which we'll get into, has been really ramping up and interest has been increasing, a big part of that actually has been, and we're thankful for this, is this author named Joel Green. And he wrote a book called The Immunity Code, which we're big fans of. And in the book, Joel Green talks about how he really recommends that you seek the advice of a trained physician, of your choice, whether it's holistic or traditional or what have you, but somebody who, can really try to do an analysis and gauge what types of probiotics you should take. So I apologize. I've gotten into a bit of a tangent here about probiotics, but you asked what they're doing to you. And so, basically you are manipulating the colonies, the species, the types of bacteria that are in your gut. And you can change them. You're born with a certain amount. You get some from birth, depending on the way you're delivered as a baby. A vaginal delivery, it's believed that you're getting a different amount and different types of bacteria actually that is innately given to you that way. Then based on what you're eating, based on genetics, a host of factors. But you can alter and change that bacteria even in adulthood for sure. And we know that. But the question is, how do you do it? To what extent? How much do you want to do it? And how do you do it? So if you're taking probiotics, you're adding new, species or strains to your gut. And with prebiotics, you're giving them fuel to feed them essentially. And so they can behave in different ways or grow or mature, expand, etc. I'm probably using the wrong vocabulary there. So you're basically manipulating, you are doing a science experiment or you're trying to feed and help your gut. And your gut is like, this is something I didn't really fully understand until recently, but the foods you eat can sort of either be feeding you or they can be feeding your gut. And that gets like really, kind of meta and a little complicated to fully grasp. And it took me a while to kind of process that. But basically, for example, if you eat a baked potato and you eat it piping hot out of the stove with butter or what have you, that's a starchy food that is going to basically be feeding you. So you're going to digest that as a carbohydrate. It's going to be carbohydrate fuel, simple. But if you let it cool down, there's different properties that exist at that point such that actually can feed your gut. And so the gut bacteria will digest that and they'll basically take the benefit. So it basically will just act differently in your body. And the same thing can go for beans like black beans or garbanzo beans. The same thing can go for other types of foods as well. The types of food or the temperature of the food can really matter whether that food is like going to have this, glycemic response in your body, spike blood sugar, or affect your gut bacteria, or if it's going to basically just avoid the gut, and kind of go through and process as fiber and then be excreted. So it's very fascinating. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, so I can't speak, to the fine details of it, but it's very fascinating. And there's a lot of research, people can do individually to see this process in action. And it gets back to that whole concept of, are you feeding yourself or feeding the gut? But then again, the gut is you. So it's kind of weird to mentally conceptualize.
So interesting, because I never even considered how the temperature of my food would make a difference in what it does for me. Of course, I'm aware that eating raw versus cooking in different ways makes a difference, and what types of food makes a difference. There just happens to be even more to it than that, and when we're talking about our gut. I have a better idea of what prebiotics and probiotics are now, so I think it's time we start talking about HMO.
And so that enters the conversation of HMO, which, the first time I ever heard that, not coming from a science background, I thought of, actually it was the 90s when I first heard the term HMO, which is like a health management organization. It's like a type of health plan you can choose from your employer or something to that extent. But, we're hoping that the new acronym, or the new meaning of HMO becomes a lot more familiar to the world, and that is human milk oligosaccharide. Human milk oligosaccharide is a component that is naturally in breast milk, in human milk. So HMO is the acronym, and it was first discovered around the late 1800s. They began researching it. They started noticing that breastfed babies in general were having better survivorship or survivability rates than those who weren't breastfed, or were having less bouts of like diarrhea and things like that, an illness. And so they're okay, why is this? So let's start comparing, the difference. And so they looked at, breast milk and what was in it. And there's lactose in it, there's fat, and there's this substance that at the time they gave a different name. I think they called it gynolactose, but ultimately around the 1950s, then they changed the name to HMO, or human milk oligosaccharide. So there's actually a number of oligosaccharides. Some of them basically, if you Google like best prebiotic supplements, some things will come up and you'll see there's one called GOS, and there's FOS and XOS. And so GOS, for example, stands for galacto oligosaccharide. FOS is fructo oligosaccharide. So these are different types of chained, I believe they're acids, but so these are types of prebiotics, fibers essentially, and HMO is one of them. So the story of it is honestly pretty fascinating, at least in my opinion. But, researchers look into breast milk, they're studying it, and they're realizing, okay, wait a minute, this specific part of breast milk, this oligosaccharide that's in it, that's natural to it or inherent in breast milk, is providing the immense benefits, that are coming from breast milk. This is the majority of what is producing the benefits. And so research goes on and on and on, and they're discovering that there's actually about 200 different types of this thing called HMO. And so they get into these really scientific names, they've labeled them like scientists do. And so one of them is called 2'-fucosilactose. And one is, 3-SL or 2-SL or LNNT. And so there's 200 of those acronyms and names that are very scientific, but they all have different properties. And so basically what they're realizing is that, wait a minute, this HMO in the breast milk is basically what is encoding or building the infant gut lining and immune system from scratch, because we know that babies undergo a lot of development during those very formative first few years. And the bulk of their nutrition, especially initially, is coming from breast milk for many babies. And some babies, it's formula or other foods, eventually baby food. So they realized that there was this immense benefit. Okay, so that's established. They conduct research studies through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even the 90s. And it's very much proven that, breast milk, because of this specific component, is a lot of benefit. The question then becomes, we need to provide this for babies who don't have access to breast milk, either because the mother doesn't want to provide it or can't provide it because of some, reason. And so they start working on a way to formulate HMO to basically replicate it or synthesize it and create something that's molecularly identical. And that took decades, but they did achieve it scientifically in the early 2000, I don't know how to say this, 2010s, 2010, 2011, around that era. And then eventually in 2015, 16, 17, it starts popping up in baby formula. So actually, as listeners can experiment with this, go to your grocery store, go to the baby formula aisle, whether you have a baby or not, and look at the labels. And you will now see that, I think almost in every country, but especially in the US, it says HMO on the label of baby formula, which stands for human milk oligosaccharide. And so there's not actually human breast milk in the baby formula. That's not what they're doing. But what they are doing is they've come up with, scientifically, there was developed ways that you can create something that is considered to be bioidentical to this really powerful formula, or this really powerful component of breast milk. And so how do they do it? There's a number of ways to do it. You can basically take a type of yeast and ferment it and put it through a very complex process. And what you get at the end is bioidentical to one type of HMO, 2-fucosilactose. Another way to do it, the way we do it, is you take lactose, basically cow's milk, you're putting it through an extremely precise fermentation process, and then you are purifying it a number of times. And again, what you arrive at is like basically 98% bioidentical. So if you look at it under a microscope, a scientist almost wouldn't even know the difference to the HMO that's in human breast milk. I mean, another way you could get HMO is actually from breast milk, but that's really not scalable for a business or for people and would be really difficult. So there actually is a company that I guess we'd consider a competitor that is trying to give people HMO through actual human breast milk. And, I'm not afraid to say their name. They're called Trulacta, and they get it somehow through milk donors, through these donor banks. And, I think it raises a little bit of questions about whether the people who are providing it know what it's ultimately going towards and whatnot. People are realizing how powerful HMO is, but we've gone a different route, and we're basically creating something that is bioidentical to it and much easier to provide at scale. It actually is expensive to produce, but it's easier to produce at scale. And so ultimately, so it's in baby formula, okay, in 2017, 2018. And then the question became, well, wait a minute, can this help adults? And so the race was on to conduct research, and that's where basically the idea of our company came along, because Jason was in the lab and started reading about HMO and thought, wait a minute, like, why aren't we giving this to adults if it's helping babies so much? And so a lot of these research papers started coming out all over the world. I mean, we're talking many different countries, including the US, and there's a great lab in California and San Diego run by Dr. Lars Bodie, who has done a lot of the integral research on this. But basically the answer was yes. HMO, including bioidentical HMO, was also extremely beneficial for adults, beneficial in multiple ways, boosting their immunity, literally changing the bacteria in their gut, increasing a type of beneficial bacteria called bifidobacteria, increasing a type of beneficial probiotic bacteria called Akkermansia muciniphila, and things of that nature. So then it was, okay, well, is it in any products? And so initially, there's like this group of people out there who really like to read scientific papers on PubMed and different places. And I've realized there's this whole community of people. They don't really have degrees or anything, but they love just becoming like amateur research meta-analysis folks, and they're good at it. And basically they started realizing, okay, this is very beneficial. And there's, biohackers out there who really want to figure out, okay, my main traditional doctor is not telling me what I can do to fix my IBS, or I don't want to take drugs. So what else can I do? Is there anything that's on the cutting edge or more natural? And so bottom line is people were realizing that HMO is really good for you, and they were buying baby formula, some adults, a few of them, and, basically like mixing it in with like a protein shake or milk or something and chugging it thinking, okay, I'm going to get HMO from that. And some people, I mean, this is not a scientific study, but some say that it actually helped them, okay, great. Of course, baby formula is meant for babies and has a lot of fillers in it and other things that you probably don't want. So that's where our company comes in. And we're like, okay, let's take bioidentical HMO and put it in a very pure supplement. So you're not getting all these fillers, and you can boost your immunity. You can help with weight management, which is a bold claim, but it's true. Mm-hmm. And it's basically a prebiotic that helps to feed the good bacteria in your gut and can actually increase the amounts of it very rapidly. And also in clinical studies, actual clinical trials, which I can send you the links to after this interview, helped people who, went into the study indicating that they suffered from IBS. And so I've, take HMO myself, and the initial differences from it were very rapid for me. Of course, that's not a scientific study. That's just one person, but anecdotally really helped me. I'm not someone who suffered from IBS, but I believe that all of us occasionally have issues with gas or things that we'd rather not talk about. And for me, it was really beneficial in that realm. And from a health standpoint in general, I did feel much better when I started taking it. So that is HMO, and we're really excited about it. We think that it's kind of the next big thing.
What I took away from that history of the development of HMOs is that it, like other prebiotics, are good for our gut health and seems to be able to help with some IBS symptoms. Because there is such overlap with IBS and many autoimmune and other chronic illness conditions, there's a chance that prebiotics, like ones with HMO, can be helpful for us.
To get the feedback that we've gotten, which are emails from people and reviews, which we wish people would leave more reviews, but unfortunately, including myself, it's like I buy a product and I kind of just move on with my life and forget to ever go back and tell them how I liked it. But anyway, the reviews we do get, 5 or 99% of them are really positive. And, people who are making like, honestly, really bold claims were like, wow, that's amazing. We didn't even think it would help with that. But people are saying that it's helped them get over lactose intolerance. People are saying that it's helped them be able to consume, milk for the first time in years. People are saying that it's helped them, help their stomach troubles completely. And so I mean, look, the results vary. I mean, my father started taking it and he said, I don't notice any difference. And I said, yeah, I mean, that's okay. I had an aunt that took it and she said it made things worse. So, you honestly never know. And that's kind of the warning I said at the beginning was that, especially with probiotics, because she took the product we have that's a mixture of probiotics and prebiotics. It's HMO plus probiotics. And you have to be careful with probiotics. Prebiotics are less like that for the most part. But they can, so you have to be careful with dosage and things like that. Otherwise, you can exacerbate sometimes symptoms that you already have. And so that's always a risk you're taking, right? Because you're basically, adding things to the cauldron here and hoping that you're putting in the right amount. But we are pretty careful with the dosing, the labeling of recommended dosage. And we encourage people to start off small and work their way up like you normally see on supplement labels. And if you do it that way, it's generally extremely safe. But yeah, the results have just been incredible. And it's just so weird to see someone in like Australia write a review on your website and say, thank you so much. This has changed my life. And you're just like blown away because you think that it's going to help them to some extent, but to see some people with these really drastic results is amazing.
Okay, like I said, it all sounds really helpful, but those of us with chronic illnesses are always going to be careful, as we should be, about adding in supplements or making other changes to our bodies because the last thing we want is to make things worse. Here's what Beau had to say about that.
We still suggest that everybody talk to a doctor, before starting any new supplement regimen, because you just, want to run it by them. And again, whether that's your traditional physician or if you go to a functional medicine physician or integrative or holistic or naturopathic. And we actually get a lot of orders now, wholesale orders in large quantities from doctors, which has also been a lot of validation for us because we feel like, okay, if doctors are ordering large quantities of this and then providing it to their patients or, making it available, then that's kind of a good sign, a good litmus test for us. But to get back to your question, for people dealing with chronic illness, I think they should try it. Personally, of course, I'm biased. I'm with the company, but we have competitors and, there's other companies now that are jumping into the market who also provide bioidentical HMO supplements. And so ours come in a capsule format or a powder. And those were the initial staples that we provided. And then we just launched 7 new products as well. So some of them combine HMO with vitamin D3 and zinc. Some of them, are combined HMO with fiber, very diverse types of fiber. Some of them combine HMO with something called colostrum, which I'm sure some of your listeners have heard of, which is basically the pre-milk of cows, which is supposed to be extremely beneficial. And so we're spinning up a lot of varieties and, people can tailor it to their needs, basically pick the product that they think fits their needs the best. Our most popular product is pure HMO prebiotic powder, which is just a very, very pure HMO powder. It's almost like buying the baby formula, but without all the fillers. It just has HMO. That's it. And you take a scoop or 2 a day and, people see incredible results from that, usually within like 2 or 3 days, which I find it's almost too good to be true. But for me, those results tapered a little bit. It was like I saw this very immediate impact and then it tapered a little bit. And so for me, my personal body preference was to cycle on and off of it, take it for 3 weeks, stop for a week, take it for another, that sort of thing. So people with chronic illness, I mean, I think after consulting with a physician of some sort, it's something I would try. I mean, I'm in a few different groups really for research and just understanding the needs that people have. And when I say groups, I mean on Facebook, there's a lot of groups of, what can I do to cure IBS or what can I do to heal my gut health? And even from the immunity standpoint, I mean, it's something that's why I like to take HMO primarily is just to bolster the immune system. And because honestly, if you look at the research studies, and this is what I love about our product, if you just Google human milk oligosaccharides or human milk oligosaccharide research study, or go to PubMed and just type in HMO, it just comes up. I mean, you can read the studies yourself, and it can be sometimes tough to digest them if you're not a scientist or have the science background. But just in plain English, you can see the results and, how much HMO helps infants. And then more recently, in the last 2 to 3 years, the adult studies and the research is there in the clinical studies. So it's really a matter of just, are you willing to give it a shot? And I mean, people have referenced like, is there a yuck factor the title's a little weird, obviously, human milk oligosaccharide. But again, our product doesn't even have any human milk in it, which is always, makes it a little bit tough to market because it's kind of confusing. It's called human milk oligosaccharide. It doesn't have milk in it, but it's based on human milk and the components of it. Taking prebiotic fiber is not something that in general should cause harm. It should probably only be able to help.
To summarize, consult your doctor and then maybe give it a try, because we're always looking for ways to improve our well-being, and this might just be one of them. The philosophy of Layer Origin is about the layers of well-being. To find out what those layers are, head to Patreon, as it's exclusive content for patrons of Chronically Living. So one thing I like to do with all my guests is just ask some lightning round questions. What are the top 5 songs that describe your life?
Yeah, so that's tough to answer, especially come up with 5 of them, but this is going to date me a little bit and kind of tip off the era that I grew up in. But I would say, one of them is, these are mostly just songs that I like, but I would say the song Semi-Charmed Life by the band Third Eye Blind is one that I really like. And I always like the title of it as well. It's like you have a charmed life is, it makes me think of like the movie It's a Wonderful Life, and he realizes he has a charmed life at the end with his family and everything. And, I like to think of, life as like, I have a semi-charmed life. I think that's what that means, that it's pretty good, it has its ups and downs, but it's not perfect, but there is some charm. It's a charmed life to some extent. There's a song called, this is very esoteric, but there's a song called Posthumorous by a newer artist called Gus Dapperton, who's like 22 years old or something. And I just started loving this artist like so much. I've binged every song he makes, and I'm going to see him in concert in Canada in November. So Posthumorous by Gus Dapperton. And it's a song about loss, actually, and grief in a way. And my mother passed away in 2015. So it kind of reminds me of that in a good way, of just getting over that and living with grief, but, trying to also have humor in your life and be positive. And then wrapping up, Mr. Jones by Counting Crows is one of my favorite songs. He mentions Spain. He mentions gray, which is my favorite color, which is kind of sad color, but it's my favorite color. And then there's a song called Something Good by the band called Alt J that I really like. And then finally another song called Something Good Can Work by a band called Two Door Cinema Club.
I notice a theme in a lot of those songs.
Yeah.
What's one thing you can't go a day without doing?
Boring answer, but I would say drinking water. I always tell my friends to do this too. I'm a huge fan of like ultra purified water. So we had this system put into our house that was like $5,000 to, make sure your water is very, very, very pure. And I don't know, I'm a little bit paranoid about water quality. I used to live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we had major problems with lead in the public drinking water. And the other thing to worry about, and I hate to be a worrywart, but there's a chemical called PFAS, which, has the American water system that comes from like, basically firefighters and some of the chemicals they were using, foam and stuff, and it's gotten into the water sources. And so I drink water every day. Most of us do, most of us should. And so like the first thing I do when I wake up is try to do like 8 ounces, which is a small amount of just really cold, pure water, and then move on from there with some coffee or something else. But I don't know, that's a super boring answer, but I would say drinking water. An answer that makes me sound like a jerk and like a elitist or something is I also like to check, financial stuff every day. So whether it's like the stock market or cryptocurrency, I like to check it out every day. It's like a bad habit, but just looking at the prices and stuff. So those are probably bad answers, but.
Well, the water one's a very healthy answer, so we'll give you that. What's one thing you plan on doing in your life that you haven't yet?
I guess a humble brag here, but I plan on going to the Galapagos Islands, a very interesting place, Darwin and so much history there and of natural biology and things of that nature. And so I'd love to do that. And the humble brag is that I'm going to get to do it in August. So going to be going there for a trip for 9 days or something to that extent. So I'm very excited about that. And hopefully the trip actually happens with, all the COVID protocols and everything, which are obviously very important. But yeah, so that's something, kind of a cheat answer because it's something I'm about to do, but I haven't done it yet. And it's something I do plan to do as long as everything goes off okay.
That's very cool. Actually, I love traveling. So that's actually on my list at some point too. So cool. Describe your perfect day.
Perfect day would be a Friday. It's my favorite day of the week. I love the anticipatory factor of the entire weekend is still ahead of you for the most part. So it's like, Friday, possibly like 3 p.m., still a lot of Fridays left as well. No work, no responsibilities really. It's sunny outside, 76 degrees, a little bit breezy, but not too windy. And then this day would include friends and a lot of laughter, really good food, and then also a fitness activity so that I don't feel too gluttonous and, weighed down by all the food I had. So, playing some sort of sport or hiking or running or swimming, and probably a body of water as well, whether it's a lake or an ocean. And that's it.
Very nice. And how do you and your company inspire your clients to make the most of their lives?
I think we inspire our clients to make the most of their lives through positive results, frankly. I think, there's a lot of companies that have a really good marketing pitch, and sometimes you buy the product because they make you feel really excited and you're like, oh, I'm going to try this and I'm going to start exercising more and everything's going to change, which is fine. That's good. Motivation is a really good thing and powerful thing. But then you take it and you're like, well, this isn't really doing anything. Okay. Or, in the past, I've taken probiotics and I noticed zero difference, which doesn't mean it's not helping, of course. So I think, through positive results, we inspire people, I hope, and to make change and positive change in their lives. And we, try to be ethical in everything we do and moral. And, we've had situations where people want to return the product and we accept all returns and don't ask questions. We try to be pretty honest and blunt about, this works for a lot of people. It doesn't work for everybody. So we don't guarantee that the product works. We do guarantee that we'll accept your return, though, if you don't like it. And I think we're coming from a place of science and not just, guessing or hoping that something works, but it's researched, and the fact that it's built on clinical trials. And we're lucky in the sense that we didn't particularly pay for our HMO clinical trials because they existed already for adults, because this is an area of research that's really growing and there's a lot of excitement. And so, a lot of universities are testing this at this point. And actually, there's a lot more research coming online, so it should lift the tides of the HMO sort of movement. We view it kind of like probiotics were about 15, 20 years ago, where you would kind of hear about them. I mean, it's hard to even think about that now, but let's think of 2002 or 2004, and you would certainly hear about probiotics, but kind of didn't know what they were or what they were for or how you're supposed to use them or even where to get them. And, people didn't really understand the role the gut played in your overall health at all. And so we think HMO is kind of at that phase right now. It's really young and it's not quite mature yet in the market, but we think it's going to have a rapid advancement and hopefully really help people's lives because it provides a lot of actual tangible benefits, and we're excited about that because we think that basically can benefit every single person out there. People with certain illnesses and people who don't have an illness can also benefit from it.
Amazing. And where can we find your products? You mentioned Amazon and your website.
Yes. So if you go on Amazon and just search Layer Origin Nutrition, LAYERORIGIN Nutrition, or Pure HMO is a good way to search for it. Just PURE HMO is our brand of HMO, our line. So if you're like an Amazon Prime member, a lot of people like to do that. You get that 2-day shipping and it's really easy. You click one button and you get it, in a couple of days. Or if you want to support our company, we also get higher margins if you buy it from our website. So we don't line the pockets of Amazon. We're able to just buy more inventory and better spread the word about our products. So layerorigin.com is our website, but either way is great. And, we appreciate any support and hope to really spread the word about HMO. So yeah, layerorigin.com is the best place.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Beau. This has been really informative.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. And, we're happy to have been able to talk about this topic and share some of the knowledge.
We know gut health is important and taking supplements can be very helpful for us. Prebiotics, and specifically HMO, is one way we can do that. I'm actually interested in trying a prebiotic versus a probiotic based on what I've learned today. That being said, if you're thinking the same thing, make sure that you touch base with your doctor first and see what they say. As always, let's do a little bit of a self-reflection. What did you notice about your thoughts and feelings during this episode? I noticed that I might have a way to have fewer IBS symptoms. And what are you noticing now about your noticing? Don't forget you can support the show by heading over to Patreon. I also love reviews so I can know what content to bring you. You can tag myself and Layer Origin on Instagram with your takeaways from this episode. Our handles are in the show notes. Until next week, keep making the most of it, everyone. Special thanks to Nicole Skira for the original music and to Charity Williams for the original artwork.